Can we get a Bethel-style bass tone using just this jazz bass, a direct box, and the onboard effects on the X32? I guess we're gonna find out. I would argue that the part of Bethel's mixes that sets it apart from other sounds, not better or worse, but just different from other sounds, is the bass tone. Learning about Bethel's bass tones was really the first time I ever thought outside of the box when it came to bass sounds. Up until then, I just always thought a bass sounded like this, just a direct, just like a clean bass sound. But I remember the first time I ever heard their bass tone isolated, and it was one of the most absurd sounds I'd ever heard. It was just so over the top, so distorted, and so aggressive sounding that I didn't even believe it. I thought it was awesome, but I just didn't get it. But then I went back and I started listening to their songs, and that's when it occurred to me that they don't even have a rhythm guitar to speak of. I mean, technically, yeah, but they don't have that traditional electric rhythm sound in there. They have a crazy aggressive bass tone that fills in that gap. And that's what makes their mix just sound different. Again, not better or worse, just different. So I had the thought a while back, how close could we get to that type of sound? I'm not saying as good, but how close could we get to that type of sound using just a bass and a direct box and then the built-in Sans amp on the X32? So I dialed in a sound. We'll see how close I got. So first, this is just the direct in sound. This is just the bass into a DI straight into the back of the board. Also, I'm not really a bass player. I'm just a front of house guy that is picky about bass sounds. So here we go. Okay, so in some videos I've seen, that is what Bethel's bass players kindly call the dad bass sound. There's nothing wrong with it. It's just in their context, it wouldn't work. The mix would just be really lacking. It would probably sound weak as a whole. And so one thing I picked up on over the years, at least for the big moments, they always seem to switch to the pick. And so as a front of house guy, my analysis of that is really what the pick adds is an attack to the note that you don't get with your fingers. I kind of relate it to kicking on a pedal for a bridge. It's just that next level up off of a different sound. And so first thing, they always pick up a pick for that aggressive sound. And now I'll turn on the Sans amp in the X32. I've just got patched as the insert onto my channel. I'll put up some images here so you can see the settings and see how it's done. But it's going to be a good bit louder. I'll try to bring it down in post to match a little bit. I've got it dialed back basically as far as I can, but it still adds a lot of gain. Okay, so we're going from this to this. Okay, so in comparison, that's pretty over the top. And I will say, playing into that, I don't have the top end really boosted. But what I've noticed with the different controls on here, the buzz or the punch, those seem to do more in the low mids, that muddy section, somewhere in there, some different saturation things down in those ranges. But when you get up to the crunch and the drive, those do more of the crunch and the drive up in the upper mids. There's the EQ section here, and I've actually boosted the lows. I think that I left the highs alone. But I do feel like this sound can get a little out of hand in those upper mids if you don't play super consistently. If you could tell, I mean, I didn't at times. And I feel like that is where things sort of start getting out of line, where a real amp or, maybe some better pedals, whatever, don't want to praise the gear too much, but, some better options out there might do a little more justice to that part of the EQ range. But honestly, if you don't have any options, I think it's decent, to work with. I think that as a front house guy, I mean, that's with the EQ flat. I think that you could get a decent sound when you really think of the big picture. Now, one thing I do want to point out, I would probably say to use a volume pedal for this, but you can dial your volume back because you don't want to be locked into that sound all the time. That would be ridiculous. So you do want to be able to dial it back and clean up your sound. And this actually does clean up decently. It's not perfect, but it can dial back to a little more mild sound. So I'll show you this. I'll dial my volume knobs back about, 50% or so, and we'll see what it sounds like. Then you bring it up for the big bridge or whatever. So you have options. You can dial your volume back, bring your tone knob down. You bring your volume pedal back and just move your tone knob a little bit, but then you can go, and just get over the top. So I mean, it's not perfect, but I think it's a pretty cool option. And I mean, it may help you guys get a kind of a different sound. Now, I will say, if you're a front of house person watching this, I wouldn't go sneaking this on your bass player, because this is something that you need to have running where the bass player can hear, because this is definitely a tone that you play into. You don't just have this on all the time and then they just kind of pluck along. This is something that really takes it can take some finesse to make it work, because if you're just kind of punching into that crazy distorted sound, it's going to probably sound pretty distracting in a mix if it's not done in a way that blends with everything else. So yeah, I mean, I thought it was kind of fun. I hope this is helpful. If you're a bass player watching this, you have any specific stuff or any tips, drop them in the comment section. I'd love to read them. I'd love to, learn more about that. I mean, this is just my interpretation and me kind of, having some fun finding different tones on this just to see what we can do with basically nothing. So yeah, hope it's helpful. See you guys in the next one.